off my notes and my slides a little bit, but can you see this? Okay, the estate manners slide here.
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Today's really good. I like this one a lot. I mean, you might have questions. This might be just reminder information for you or anybody else that comes on. But these are some good basics to talk about for estate management, and for especially if we have any sort of bit of assets we're going to be dealing with, and how to preserve that and make sure we're passing that off, right? So questions that I kind of want to cover over today, stuff like, do I need a will or a trust? What is probate? How's my money taxed when I die? And so around that, right, estate management, this is about preserving your assets that you spent your life building, no matter where you are in that section. But it's about protecting you, your spouse, your children, other heirs, and making sure your assets are going where you want them to go and when you want them to go. So I want to go over some of those tactics, some critical documents, and then a little bit how those estate taxes work. I like to encourage notes. I'm a big note taker, and I'll share my background. Let's see, there's somebody dinking in right now saying they're being late. But I'll share a little more about my story here in a minute. But I'm a huge note taker in my life. It's been a big deal, and it's almost like when pen to paper. I don't know about you, but when pen hits paper, it's almost like it kind of bores a hole in my brain. And even then, I'll take a lot of notes on my phone, but just kind of when there's the physical act, it sits a lot more on me. And so what I'll do on this is I'll save Q&A till the end. And if you got Q&A coming along, come on, there's my dad popping in right now. If you got any Q&A along the way, use the text box in this. And so ask those questions. I'll visit that later. So I'll leave a couple minutes at the end so we can have some Q&A if there's any. And then I'll also, I'll send this out to everybody. Second note there, webinar will be emailed out. I'll send this out because I have a handful of other people that signed up for it that probably won't be able to make it, or people that will be late that missed the portion. And so I'll send this out to everybody so you can at least have the replay of it and have access if you want to go back and review the slides at all. So that's a big deal. I like to make notes, so I'll do these webinars monthly. I'm actually do several. 2 days ago, I did a small business webinar, or wealth principles for small business owners. And today is the estate management, and tomorrow for a client of mine, I'm doing retirement for realtors. So I do a lot of these, but the ones that I'll share a lot on my site at least are at least my monthly ones. So I like to share a bunch of information. I like to try to equip my people or other people in the process, frankly, because if we're weaponized enough to a point where we can handle our own life, we can usually help somebody else who has a question in theirs. And so that's what I want, because a lot of people are just financially inept or don't have any clue on where they're going. And so if we can help protect some areas, or just gain ground in areas that we're maybe not so sharpened up on, this is my goals. I want to sharpen people up on those. So next month's webinar is Wealth Management 101. We're just talking about market summary strategies, protecting your life against rising costs, pitfalls, and some different principles of investing. And I'll show you, I want to show a little, just so you see this real quick. This is my site. And so if you want to go on here and check that out, procapitaltx.com, you can click on the events tab and sit here and go down. This is today, obviously, and go down and see what events are available. This is next month, this June 3rd, Wealth Management. So you can register for that if you want to do that, and you find some value in today. And so I'll be holding a trophy club party here next week. So Gabe, if you're around, hit that. That's one I'm doing for just trophy club residents, because I have a handful of clients in this area. And so, kind of like a bring your neighbor, bring your friend sort of deal. And so I'll be doing that. So you can check that one out too. And then you'll see some past events that I've had here. But I got a ton of resources on here that I love that you can go into in a bunch of different categories. and useful links. Obviously, check us out and see what's going on there. But I'm kind of a nerd about our site. There's new content coming on there all the time. I have a great back end team who manages that, and I love that in a big way. And so let's get going on here. Check out the site, take notes, and we can continue on. I want to give you a little bit of my background. So I played 6 years in the NFL, 2005 to 2010, mostly here with the Cowboys. Started in Detroit with the Lions on practice squad. Picked up with Bill Parcells here with Cowboys, ultimately in the Wade Phillips as a swing guard and center. Went to Miami. That's where a lot of athletes go to die, unfortunately. And so that's what happened to me. I ruptured my patella tendon, and a whole lot of surgeries later. Here I am. I actually got in sales before I was in the financial industry, which was a great learning season for me. But what ended up happening was my advisor that I got was when I was playing, she did a great job of learning me up, and I wasn't afraid to ask the stupid questions. And so I would ask that, and kind of as a side effect, I became pretty competent in my own portfolio. And so when I started exploring it as an option, she was great, sponsored me to take my licensing exams, and basically just said, hey, go build your business and build your book. And so really great. So I operate out of the House and Trophy Club here out of my home, which is really easy. And so Pro Capital Wealth Management is my DBA, my LLC. I'm a broker dealer through Woodbury out of Minnesota, which only handles independent advisors. It's backwards way to go, but I love doing that instead of starting out at a big wirehouse, because I'm not held to any specific financial products or boss, frankly, tell me what I should be doing with people's money. And so I like that route. So that's the way I went. So, and it has ended up being a really great place for me. So why I do what I do, man, I've had different experiences in my life and had different things, crazy things happen. We're come from a blended family where you see finances affect that to a degree. Come into the NFL where a lot of athletes go broke. And frankly, I didn't want that in my life. So I was a pretty frugal guy. And I got a big work ethic from my parents, which brought me into an awesome place, not in the NFL, but just where I'm at right now. And has created a huge consumer. So I consume a ton of information, books, podcasts. I'm kind of nerd when it comes to all that stuff. And so it creates a really great deal for me. And then even on the tough side of life, losing a family member and experience what medical bills, how those can stack up in a great way. There was just been some things that have happened in my life where I didn't want money to be a limiting factor. So whatever, whether that was on my marriage or on my children or, on future medical decisions, whatever the case, I didn't want that to be a big deal. And so obviously the NFL gave me a great income where it launched me into a good place. But thankfully 10 years removed from the NFL, I'm in a lot better place than I ever was playing ball. And so I have my own advisor a lot to thank for. I have my parents to thank for a lot of good behaviors I've gotten, and frankly, a lot of good stuff that I've done to make sure that stuff was implemented to make sure I walked the right path. And so not perfect by any stretch, but we're doing some good things. Jumping into it, just to kind of give you guys a little bit a disclaimer, I'm not an estate planning attorney. Estate planning is part of my practice and what I do to make sure I'm protecting people against some pitfalls that are going on. But I don't know everything, right? So I know enough to make me dangerous, but I'm not an estate planning attorney. So I want to make sure you guys know that, but I could definitely share some good things about that. And so I want to share this and equip some people to do that. So we'll get into a little bit. What are the main objectives for effective estate management? First, we're trying to manage financial and personal affairs during your lifetime. And then second, we're trying to distribute your wealth after your death. And if it's done well, right, it can make a huge difference. It can help you spell out healthcare wishes and ensure that they're carried out, even if you're unable to communicate, and that's a big deal. And so it can help you ensure possessions go to your heirs, your beneficiaries, without any sort of legal wrangling that might tie it up in any sort of way. So effective estate management, it can help avoid needless expenses and legal costs, probate, and it can provide, right, for the people that you want it to provide for, and keep it protected in a big way. And so we'll jump right into it. Excuse me here, going on my slides here. And so really, we kind of build it off a foundational element on how estate taxes work, documents that are critical in that process, and then what are some tactics that we can use to deploy those, or what are some things that we can contribute that might pair along with those documents that are a big deal, right? And so we'll start. I want to start off by the foundation of this pyramid here, which is how estate taxes work. And so I love history. I don't know about you guys, but the older I get, the more I like it. When I was a kid, I didn't really care as much, but now I like it a little more. Why? Because it gives context to why we do things right now. And if we forget those things, obviously we have a tendency to repeat the past, and we don't want to do that necessarily. But we got to understand this. So if you look at this, this is a history of estate laws. We want to look at them. So looking at the history, the first estate tax established was in 1797 to fund an undeclared war with France. And then right after the war ended, the tax went away. So this is similar to like prohibition or the income taxes early on. A lot of times these were to fund wars in a certain way. And then it happened again in the Civil and Spanish American Wars. Congress passed an estate tax to pay for the war and then repealed it afterwards. And then until 1916, the 16th Amendment to the Constitution was passed in 1913. And the one that gives Congress the right to lay and collect taxes on income from whatever sources derived. And so that led to the Revenue Act of 1916 and established the estate tax. And it's been modified over the years, changed, but it's never been repealed. And then in 2012, the American Tax Relief Act made estate tax a permanent part of the tax code. We can get lots of opinions in here. I don't want any taxes, but that's when it was made permanent. And then in 2017, the Tax Cut and Jobs Act from the Trump administration, it doubled the estate tax exemption, which is a big deal, to 10 million, which is 11.58 million currently with inflation. And then that's what it was. And the law right now, that is set to expire in 2025 at the end of that year. But I'm sure a lot of you guys know with the proposed Biden administration, they want to increase this or decrease the exemption from that 11.58 down to 3.5 and increase the tax rate from 40% to 45%. So we're kind of coming into some potential change right here. But we got to fix our eyes for where we're at right now. And we can project all day long, but until those are implemented, we got to act by today's rules. And so this becomes, but it's important to stay aware of this stuff, right? So let's look at just a hypothetical. So one big thing during the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is a really big deal, is when they doubled the estate tax exemption, it essentially took a big chunk of our population out of this picture. So a lot of people who might fall in this 11.58 million or double that for married filing jointly, a lot of people or the people that fall into this is a very slim part of our population here in the U.S. But even if you do, this is where estate planning can be a really big deal. So look at a quick hypothetical right here. So let's say we're still acting by today's rules, and you have a $12 million gross value estate, right? Well, if our exemption level is up to 11.58, we don't pay taxes on any of that. Estate taxes, federal estate taxes on any of that yet. So we take our 12 minus 11.58, which give us a $420,000 taxable amount times the current tax rate, which is at 40%. Which equals 168,000 estate tax. So if you're somebody who falls in this, estate planning is a big deal. You need to have this. You need to be having these conversations for sure. And then even if you don't, we're going to talk about it some more, but even if you don't, there's going to be reasons for estate planning in your portfolio for sure. But if you fall in this category, this is a big deal. There's a bunch of critical documents that we got to have as part of your estate plan. First thing is a will. It's probably the most basic, but the most important one. And what a will does is it tells the world exactly where your assets are to be distributed when you die. And so what you can see on the slide here is what's crazy. 60% of Americans don't have a will. Only 40% have one. And so this is the reigning majority of our people in America don't have direction for where their assets are going to go when they die. And so that's a tough thing. Everyone should have a will. And it's really short-sighted to not have one. And I get it. People get busy and you're not your nose to the grindstone trying to take care of your family. And that's great. But this is an important thing because you can leave a whole lot of question up in the air if you die without one, or because if somebody dies intestate or without a will, it's left up to the state to decide how that person's assets are going to be distributed. And I don't know about you guys. I really don't want to leave that up to government for any stretch to distribute my assets how they see fit and not how I see fit. So this is why a will can be, it needs to be a huge part of anybody's estate planning. And even if you have a trust, you still need a will because you still need to take care of any holdings outside of the trust when you pass. It's a big deal. So it becomes the cornerstone of your estate, right? So this is a big deal. What it does, it names the executor. This is the person that oversees the process of distributing your estate or your assets after your death. It names a guardian for your minor children if you have them, and it can direct your property to be distributed how you want it to be distributed. Now, this is great, right? But it has shortcomings. A will does. What it means, and what I mean by that, it can be contested. And in fact, the probate court will send out notice of the will to anyone who might have grounds to contest it. And if somebody wants to contest it, there's potential for a battle in probate court. And so also on top of that, since a will is instruction to probate court, it pretty much guarantees probate. So the probate process, it can be expensive, and it could take months or up to a year or more to go through this. And it's a public record. So anybody who wants to look at what you're distributing from your will and who gets it, they can see that on public record. So privacy goes out the door with this. So it comes with some downfalls in a big way. I got to get ahead of myself in this, right? That was the purpose of this. It's a huge estate management tool, but anyone can find out how much you left and to whom you found out, or to whom you left it to. So that ends up being a big thing there. So if you want privacy, this is where we start looking at some other areas, but let's start looking at some other documents that we got to start considering having in place first. Two different columns here to look at for estate management documents is our healthcare and then our financial documents. And so these are two different places that we got to look at. These are among these especially in the health side are advanced directives. They include a living will, power of attorney, a durable power of attorney for healthcare, and then our financial documents and agreements like joint ownership, durable power of attorney, and living trust. And we'll jump into these healthcare documents first. So you guys might remember the case Terry Schiavo. This was 2006, but this was a big case back in the day where essentially Terry Schiavo became incapacitated and did not have a will or did not have any advance directive or direction on what she wanted taken care of in the event of incapacity. And so because that was the case, her family was caught up in a giant battle for several years on whether they were to let her pass or to keep her alive on life support. And so this got caught. It was in a ton of news, but even then, at the forefront, they were caught in that big battle. A lot of people don't take the steps necessary to make sure they have these advanced directives in place. And so, she didn't have that living will, and so her wishes couldn't be known. And so a lot of people, even then, don't follow and don't kind of get these in place. So anyways, excuse me, don't mean to jump way ahead like that. But what it does, a living will provides specific instructions about your medical care if you become incapacitated and you do not have the ability to communicate. It goes into effect immediately on upon your incapacity and doesn't need to go through any additional legal proceedings. Big deal right there. Power of attorney document authorizes somebody to handle legal and financial decisions when you become incapacitated. It can also go into effect upon your capacity or on any other trigger event that you might specify. Like a living will, power of attorney does not go through any other legal proceedings. And now there are individual states that have their own power of attorney laws. So you want to look at some of those that you might, they might have some different regulations you might take into consideration when you're trying to make a choice about your estate management. All right, and then your durable power of attorney for healthcare agreement authorizes someone to make decisions for healthcare on your behalf. And like the living will and power of attorney, it doesn't need to go through any additional legal proceedings. And so, this can be power of attorney, durable power of attorney for healthcare. That can be the same person. It could be separate people. But this is important because if you don't have the ability to answer for yourself while you're still alive, you need to have somebody you love, you trust, in the driver's seat to be able to make those decisions that you would want to be able to make. So, or at least to carry those out that you see fit. So these are critical documents that you need to have. And so going forward with that, like when you think about the case of Terry Schiavo, the question that begs to be asked in that situation is like, does your family know what you want? Do they know in the case that you become incapacitated and you cannot speak for yourself and you don't have that ability, do they know your wishes and how you'd want to carry forward with that? And so, apologize, I need to turn this thing on silent right now. My phone's trying to jump in on me.
I'm listening to this.
Yeah, I'm gonna
asset management or whatever thing.
I'm gonna go ahead and mute you here, Gabe, and we can unmute here at the end. But we're looking at that. Do they know what you want? And so right now, current day research shows about 70% of older Americans complete advance directives before their death. That's up about 30% from what it was a decade ago. So good direction, but even more so, we need that. But especially why this is so important is we have an expected life, extended life expectancy. People living in their mid 80s right now. And so that's the average. Mid 80s is the average life expectancy. Half of our nation is living past that, potentially into the 90s and 100s. And so there's a lot of people that still, this becomes an important deal for. And so with medical care taking much more, or a whole lot more advances right now and a lot more treatment options available, the chance that you or someone else close to you will need this or benefit from an advanced director is greater than ever, right? There's a lot going on there. Going on to financial documents. Just as there's certain ones for your health care where you want somebody in the driver's seat for that in the case that you can't speak for yourself, you want somebody in the driver's seat in the case you can't speak for yourself when it comes to your finances. So we'll go through a few of those right now. Joint ownership. And this is like holding property, title to a property is it's a way of holding title to a property, but it's useful if one of the partners dies. And this partner could be your spouse, it could be a business partner, it could be a friend, a relative, it could be anything that you choose to make that. But what happens is in the event of your death, the other assumes ownership without the property having to go through probate. And it goes into effect as soon as that joint ownership is recorded and doesn't need to go through any other legal proceedings. And so you might think of this in your home where you own jointly with your spouse or someone else. You might think of this, you might have heard of this in a joint tenants with rights of survivorship in a brokerage account where you own jointly with somebody else. In the event that this partner passes, the rest of the ownership goes completely to this other one. That's a big deal. And then moving on, durable power of attorney. This allows you to appoint a person or organization to take care of your financial affairs when you're unable to do it yourself. So it's durable because it includes specific language that allows it to remain in effect or to take effect if you become mentally incompetent. It can go into effect immediately or in a specific trigger event, such as your incapacity, but you can set ahead of time. Powers of attorney, they can be rescinded at any time, and they don't need to go through any additional legal proceedings. Also, a living trust is a trust created while you're still alive. Living trusts go into effect when the trust documents are signed and the trust is funded. That is when you're transferred assets into it. Living trusts do not need to go through any other additional legal proceedings either. So you can kind of see, as we're going through some of these documents, the benefits you start getting in a big way, right? We've already talked about, like, if I have to go through probate, it's no longer private, it's public record. And my will has the ability to be contested by somebody. And if a judge sees grounds in probate court for that, he could choose to split assets in the will. That's why this trust or more estate planning could potentially be beneficial for somebody, because if you're for sure, like, I need a will, but I want to make sure that my assets are going where I want them to go, this is where the estate planning management starts taking a big effect. And so it's basically to have confidence is basically giving you confidence in your life, knowing that the court's not going to handle anything and all my assets are going to go where I want them to go specifically. And so it ends up being a big deal. Let's talk about a couple different tactics that we start using with estate management. Gifting assets. Gifting assets is a big deal. So gifting assets right now, we can gift, and this is 2020, but same for this year, we can gift up to $15,000 per recipient per year. And this comes out of our lifetime exemption or estate tax exemption, which is currently $11.58 million, like we're talking about, but potentially looking with the new administration, they're talking about reducing it down to 3.5. So that's all part of it. So if I stack up a bunch of $15,000 a year recipients, that starts taking away from my lifetime exemption of that $11.58 million currently. Just so you know. Now, anything past that $15,000, say if I gave somebody $16,000, well, now that extra $1,000 above that $15,000 creates a potential taxable event, and so now we have to pay taxes on that $1,000 that was given, and a big deal. So if you and your spouse are both making gifts, you can do it up to $30,000, and then anything above that is where we start potentially creating a taxable event. So that's also indexed for inflation, which is measured by the Consumer Price Index, and it rises in about $1,000 increments as the CPI increases. So this is a big deal. So making sure I got all my notes down here. Let's go a little more into trust conversation in these tactics. What a trust is specifically, this is a really powerful management tool. Some of you guys know this already, but it's always good to refresh. I need repetition in my life, and I will assume you guys are similar, but super powerful. But a trust is a legal entity that can own property. I can have it in tied as like a revocable trust. I can have it tied to my social security number. Irrevocable trust, I can have it have its own tax ID, and so it can be its own entity. And so there's reasons for both or either or, but it can be its own entity, and it can have property inside it. So if it's properly structured, these trusts can completely avoid probate, avoid the delays, avoid the expenses that come with it. And so it's not a matter of public record. So it's a great tool for maintaining privacy. I don't know about you, but I don't want the whole world knowing what I have. And if I pass, I don't want the whole world knowing who got what. It's none of their business. This is my business. And so It's a great tool for that. And so that might be one reason. It just doesn't just fall into somebody whose net worth might be above that estate tax exemption level, right? Because that's, for right now, not a lot of people are falling in that bucket. But for anybody who's underneath it and wants to have privacy in their estate, this is where some of these conversations can start taking off in a good way. But they can provide effective management of your assets and make sure the distribution to your heirs go the way you want it to go. Even after your death, you can actually provide instruction for these estate plans. Even I was just had a conversation with my estate planning attorney the other day as we're outlining some things for our children and what years we want them to have access into what assets. And so it can be a really great planning tools. And so it just gives you a measure of control of how assets are distributed to children or other beneficiaries and when. So it's a good tool. And then on top of it, trusts are way more difficult to contest than a will. It involves a totally a different and complex set of tax rules and regulations. I'm not a CPA, so I can't sit here and list all that, but it involves a lot more complex set of those rules. But before moving forward with that, obviously want to talk to a professional. Love to help out with that if I can. Obviously, estate planning attorneys, CPAs are also good people to have those conversations with. Ultimately, you end up having a team, ends up being a big part of your trust circle, right? Your professional circle. And so we get into it. How does it actually work? How does the trust work? What do we need to consider when we're putting together a management plan for your estate? Well, there's two major factors, two crucial factors when we're talking about estate planning. First, what's the value of your estate? So we're going through that hypothetical, as you make this calculation, you got to make sure you include all property that you control or you have interest in. So this includes personal property, your home, real estate, cash and any bank accounts, investments, retirement plans, business interests, and life insurance, including the death benefits that are part of that life insurance. And so obviously right now, we have to exceed that 11.58 million in order for you to be subject to federal estate tax. But even if you're not, you should probably consider getting your estate and healthcare documents in order so your wishes can at least be carried out. That's number one. What's the value of your estate? The second crucial factor you need to think about is, what are your estate management objectives? What's the purpose? You got to start asking yourself some different questions. So questions you might start looking at: who do I want to inherit my assets? Who do you want handling your financial affairs if you're ever incapacitated? Who do you want making medical decisions for you if you become unable to make them for yourself? Do you want to provide for your spouse if you should die first? Do you have young children you want to provide for? Is this your current children? Is it grandchildren? If your children are grown, do you want to distribute your estate equitably, meaning if not perfect, equally? Or you might have a mismatch of some way, or somebody's getting more than another person. Who knows? Will you need to provide cash to help your heirs settle the estate? There's lots of different questions to ask there. So it's not necessarily just somebody who falls in that higher above that estate tax exemption, but it's trying to meet your objectives all at the same time too. So these are the two most critical pieces of how that trust works. Another tactic to use in this, life insurance. So this can look a few different ways. You can look at purely life insurance. You can look at annuities as different tools to exercise some different things. But life insurance, it can play a big role in your estate management, especially in conjunction with a trust. And that reason is for that is a life insurance policy, however it's structured, it provides money to pay for the estate expenses that are going on. So in that hypothetical situation that we had, where somebody had 12 million and had 146,000 in taxes, or that their estate was liable for on their death, instead of coming out of the estate, you could have somebody that would take out let's say $150,000 life insurance policy and pay this minimum premium in order to cover the estate taxes that were needed in order to pass off 100% of the estate to the beneficiaries that you wanted to do. So that ends up being a big deal too. So it makes it a really powerful tool. So look at one example here. And so let's just say under a life insurance strategy, a person establishes an irrevocable trust and funds it. The trust then can purchase a life insurance policy on the life of the person that established it. So what happens there is that it effectively removes the life insurance policy at its eventual benefit from the person's estate. So this is actually an estate shrinkage method. So instead of me, Corey Proctor, owning a life insurance policy and say it's funded as part of my estate, I can put it in the trust where now it's just dropped my net worth down because I can create a separate tax ID for that trust. That trust is now the owner of that, but it's a policy on me. So I pass, it gets paid into the trust, and now the trust is the beneficiary of it and gets distributed to any other beneficiaries that are outlined in the trust. And so it's a really effective way to use this, and a lot of people use this in their estate planning. So this is a big deal. Now, obviously, life insurance comes with different things. That's why annuities can be a good tool too, because annuities don't have an underwriting process. Although I would anticipate at some time in the future they probably will have those, because you can put death benefit riders on them. But for strictly life insurance, where I'm paying for a death benefit on the event of my death, there's still underwriting processes that you have to go through. So your health, your age, your driving record, your past medical history, all those come into a place where, if you're looking at something like that, you have to make sure you're insurable to even get that. That's when maybe an annuity would look at with a death benefit rider or something like that would be another backup potential to that. So this is really good, is a really good tactic as it comes to it. And so kind of as we're coming in, we'll start closing up, and then I want to grab some questions from you guys. But there's 4 different scenarios here where somebody might be considering estate planning or estate management as part of their portfolio or their life. Because a lot of people, they hear estate and they immediately think to only the wealthy. Well, it's not necessarily the case. Anybody has the potential to need some estate management of some sort. Everybody should have a will. And then if you want specific direction on some assets, you might be looking at some sort of revocable trust or family trust or another avenue of some sort. But these are some scenarios I wanted to throw at you. So maybe you had a husband and wife with kids to ask, what's the best way to gift assets to our children and grandchildren? We have a blended family, meaning they're remarried, multiple arms of the family, lots of stuff, a lot of moving parts. What type of trust would be appropriate for us? That would be somebody who might be looking at estate management. A retired couple would want to know, is a living trust worth the trouble and worth the expense to set up? What is the best way for us to take title of our assets? That's a big deal too. Another one that would fall under that, somebody has any toys, or maybe you have rental properties. I come across this quite a bit where I'll ask the question, somebody says they have a rental property, and I'll say, hey, if you don't mind me asking, how is that held in title? And they're like, well, it's just under Bob's name, or it's just under so-and-so, Lucy's name. And I go, okay, well, that's not something I would want. I wouldn't want that in my life. And they always ask, why? What are you talking about? Well, in the event, potentially, if I have a rental property and say I have renters in that, it's held in my name, and they choose to hold a party, somebody slips and falls, breaks a leg, and they decide they want to sue, now you're held liable and all your assets are potentially exposed to that lawsuit. Where if you had it in some sort of LLC or a trust or some protective veil, you start limiting the ability for somebody to get at those. And so putting those into a trust of some sort is an option for giving you those veils of protection that are going to be needed in a big way. So that's something I think about when you're talking about title, or take title of our assets, is to protect yourself too. You might have a single parent or a business owner that's sitting there wondering, how am I supposed to protect my business interests in the event of death? And do I have all the critical documents I need in case of a catastrophic change in my health? Well, this person would look at this too. Last one here, you might be a person that likes to do all your own research online. You might be sitting here asking, are the critical healthcare documents I downloaded legally binding? Or how can I make sure I avoid probate and estate taxes? That first question, that legally binding downloaded online, that's a good question, because the language in these documents is a big deal. And if it's not the right language or verbiage in there, that can have effect on how our assets are passed off or how directives are carried out. So this is a big deal. So, I mean, the answers to all of these scenarios, these 4 different ones, they can vary with each individual, with each situation. So I would love to address them any review. Anybody has something like that. What I want to do now is I want to open it up. You guys might have some questions. I got short, kind of came into a good pocket, 45 minutes here, 40 minutes of the webinar right now. So kind of keeping it short and sweet, but I wanted to open up some questions if you guys might have any, and see what's going on there. I was going to open up the chat box. Nothing chat box right now, but I'm going to unmute you guys, and I'm going to see if you guys have any input or you guys got any questions for me about this. Ask to unmute. Here we go. Gabe, you got anything?
Yeah, I was just curious how, so generally, so the multifamily investments that we do, and we have, it's a sort of either 2 or 3 LLCs are formed for each property because we're doing a syndication. So just sort of curious how you potentially structure, legally structure it where we, to pass on, our ownership in that or in that LLC.
So you say it again. So you have your LLC, but how would that pass off, is what you're saying?
Yeah, and so we're, we own, X% of the LLC, which of the management LLC, which in turn sort of manages or holds the property. I could send you over a basic org chart of how we're setting up one right now anyway. So I guess just curious, well, I guess if we're named, yeah, I'll think about it, because I'm probably confusing myself here.
What I if I'm getting it right, you say, hey, we have these business interests. These assets are held in the business, and basically, how can I ensure that those get passed off in the event I die tomorrow? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's obviously, if we were 100% owners, it would probably be a little simpler. But just because of the entity structure and how these are set up, it may be a little more tedious, I would guess, but maybe not. Maybe I'm overthinking it.
Sometimes, not necessarily. It's what you can do. I have this in my own personal life, right, where, and this might not be exact for you, but there are scenarios where you can look at, I create a trust, and I list the trust as a member of my LLC as a beneficiary in the event of the passing of this the other members. And so it might be you, it might be multiple, where just like that joint ownership, that joint ownership might pass to my partner or might pass to my spouse. But you can, if you're trying to really allocate where this stuff is going, because you'll have some situations even then where, especially with blended families, you might have a husband and wife remarry, and well, they have kids. They both had kids from the previous marriage, and they want to ensure those assets are going to those specific kids. Well, if their if maybe they don't have a trust or they don't have a contingent beneficiary on their accounts in place, directing that allocation or directing where those assets are supposed to flow or transfer on death or something of the sort. You know, when one passes away, the spouse now has full control and can completely cut out the kids of that other side of that equation. Or you can even go a step further and say this spouse dies, this spouse remarries, then that spouse dies. Well, now the remarried spouse over here gets all the assets and all the kids could potentially get cut out. So this is where the estate planning is. We're trying to cut out these extreme scenarios, right? So you could do something like that where potentially looking at a trust, and this is what I've done in my life, where the trust is a member of our LLC, and in the event of the passing of the other members, ownership goes to the trust, and we have outlined who the beneficiaries of that trust have, or of the beneficiaries of the trust and the assets that are held in the trust. So you can look at something like that, and that helps because that really paves the way and clears path for any possible any problems that might come back from somebody trying to contest that, right? From your passing, trying to contest getting 100% ownership of your shares, or going through probate and potentially having to liquidate assets within that company or whatever the asset might be, having to liquidate a portion of that, eating at the value of it, just going through that process. So that's where some of this trust planning could help for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Something to chew on. That's what I say. I'm enough to be dangerous, and enough where I can start guiding and help. And we'll do that. We'll do that where, I'll start talking with, let's say it's a prospect, right? Let's say we're working together and I have this problem. Well, we'll take over assets. Say I've taken over retirement and retail brokerage accounts, whatever might be there. And then we'll retitle it in the trust. We'll take all these steps to go and then retitle those accounts in the trust name, if that's what it includes. So there's steps to take that we can get that done. But that's usually how that goes. So it's sometimes it can take a little while, but it's relatively simple and straightforward.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. I'm hollering at my dad on here. I'm trying to get him to unmute, see if he's got anything. But I'm not sure if he knows how to unmute on Zoom. So, Dad, are you still there? There he is.
Unmute?
There you go. I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, no, hey, good talk. Put my mind in a couple of, I thought I had everything under control, but I don't. So now I have to nail down a few extraneous things. You know, I had everything in a trust and a will, and there's a couple of things I think I need a little clarity on. So back to the drawing board.
Well, don't sound deflated. It's no problem. That's something that we can help with. That's okay.
Okay.
Was there any other questions regarding that? Any comments or anything that stood out that you might want clarity on, or we can follow up after this too, but that might be relevant to anybody else. I'm going to send this webinar out to everybody who registered, so they have a copy of it and they can follow along with the information and slides themselves. But is there anything you think might be relevant to anybody else?
Not for me.
Awesome. Okay. Well, dude, have this. You guys, if you had it, I'll put it up one more time as we're sitting here. Close this out. Leave this up here for a second. But if you guys want, take a snapshot of this with your phone or on your computer or something. But if you guys got any questions, I'll follow up with you, Dad. I'll follow up with you, Gabe, afterwards. It'd be good to introduce each other anyway, especially when we're in the same neighborhood. and see if there's anything to help with. But if you guys got anything, this is all my information right here. And then if you guys need anything, but I'm going to have these monthly. I'm going to post this onto my YouTube and share it to everybody in email also, so you guys have a copy of this. But other than that, we're at the top of the hour right now, 11:54, so we got time for lunch, and Big Boy wants to go eat. So thanks guys for being on.
All right, thank you.
All right, guys, we'll see ya.